Welcome to episode 208 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Kailys Smith Westbrook, an actress and producer who recently did a film called People You May Know, which is a comedy drama about a young man who uses social media to raise his social status. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find these episodes valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Over on iTunes, I want to thank a user who goes by the name of Lost It All, who left me a very nice review over at iTunes. Thank you for that. It's very much appreciated. If you do have a minute, please do go to iTunes and leave some feedback. If there's a comment you want to make to me that you don't want to be public, that's perfectly fine. You can always email me at info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. I really have no way of knowing what aspects of the podcast people like and what aspects they don't like, so any and all feedback is very much appreciated. These iTunes reviews really are helpful as well. Helps get the podcast listed in more places in iTunes so it reaches a broader audience. Also, if you subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, it's a nice, convenient way to get those episodes downloaded to your phone each week. So you could try that. All you got to do is hit the subscribe button. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 208. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell a screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So a quick few words about what I'm working on. As mentioned last week, I'm done with the pinch and I'm now working on the sales and marketing of it. I got a couple more festival rejections, so I think I'm up to about 5 rejections and no acceptances so far. Again, there's about 30 contests that I submitted to, so it's not an auspicious start for my festival run, but hopefully I will get into at least a few festivals when it's all done. So on the writing front, I'm still working on episodes for the kids' TV show that I've been working on for the last couple of months. The producers cut a sizzle reel, so if you have any interest in checking that out, I will link to it in the show notes. It basically showcases the comedy from the star of this kid's show, who is a Vegas performer named Gregory Popovich, no relation to the NBA coach. He runs a show in Vegas called Popovich's Comedy Pet Theater. His show is basically him doing physical comedy and then his pets performing all sorts of crazy tricks. So Popovich and myself cooked up a story idea for the TV show that could really showcase his physical comedy and his ability to get his pets to do these incredible tricks. So the sizzle reel will hopefully give people a taste of that comedy and sort of give people an idea of what the show will all be about. The producers are trying to get the business and financial stuff in order while I go off and write the first season. We're hoping we can shoot 6 episodes for the first season, and then if that works out, obviously we'll hope to shoot more down the road. I've already written 2 episodes so far, so I've got to write this 3rd episode here in the next few weeks, and then hopefully I'll have the 6 episodes done. I would say probably February, March, something like that. I think the producers want to shoot in May or June. You know, things always seem to take longer than expected, so I'd say we'll be lucky if we shoot the thing, you know, even over the summer, maybe into the fall. But whatever the case may be, I got to get these episodes written and be ready to go with that. So once again, check out the show notes if you have any interest in watching the sizzle reel. I'll link to it in the show notes. So the other big thing I'm working on is the SYS Select Screenplay database. I mentioned that last week. This is going to be one of the big things that I work on this year. Obviously, it's not exactly screenwriting related, but it is screenplay related or selling your screenplay related. In any event, though, this will continue to take up a lot of my time. So I thought it was worth mentioning in this section. And I will talk about it more. I'll kind of give the full pitch later after the interview if you're wondering what it is I'm talking about. So somewhat related to this project is another project that I just completed over the last couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago, I emailed all of the readers who read for the SYS Screenplay Analysis Service, and I asked them if there were any scripts that came through over the last year or so that they thought were really great. And of course, there were quite a few. So I decided to put my own list of unproduced screenplays from 2017 together, and I decided to give my list a particular angle, specifically low-budget screenplays. So this is the first annual. It's called the Budget List. It's now available. I will link to it in the show notes so you can actually get the PDF and have a look at it. There's 7 screenplays that made the list this first year, and they could all be produced on budgets of well less than $1 million. So this isn't just some shameless plug for my new list. There was quite a few interesting things that I noticed when I was putting this list together, and I thought I would share those with you today. So first, and the most importantly, as my readers sent in their suggestions, I started to look at the screenplays and the writers who wrote those screenplays. Just going through my list, of the completed analyses in the SYS Script Analysis Service, I just started to look at what these writers had written, what the other people had, what the other readers had given these same scripts, if they had submitted the same script to different readers, and what other scripts that they had received. In many cases, these screenplays had received considers and recommends from other readers, and I thought that was interesting. I mean, most of the scripts that got recommended, I think there was one script that only was submitted once, and it got a consider or recommend, so the reader recommended it. So there wasn't a lot to go in. But I think the other scripts, at least 5 out of the 7, those writers had submitted multiple scripts to the Script Analysis Service. Many of their scripts had received considers and recommends. In a few cases, too, and this was really surprising, but it really hammered the point home, I had readers suggesting different screenplays from the same writers. And it started to really get me seeing that there was sort of a handful of writers that were sort of floating to the top. They were submitting many scripts. They were getting a lot of good grades from the analysis service. I've said this before on the podcast. The people who have had the most success with my email and fax blast service are the people who have at least a little bit of experience in this business. And just writing scripts, getting feedback on your scripts, that's part of the experience that I'm talking about. So many people, when I get these emails, sort of cynical emails all the time. People feel like, it's breaking into screenwriting is sort of a catch-22. They can't get a producer or an agent to read their stuff until they've actually done something. But of course, they can't do something until they get a producer or reader to read their stuff. And they sort of complaining about the catch-22 nature of the business. And these writers are showing us sort of how it's done. You have to do a ton of hard work for years, and then eventually, if you're talented, persistent, and probably a little lucky too, you might make it. So many people want a magic bullet, something easy that they can learn that will elevate their scripts to the next level. I understand that. I love to find a few magic bullets myself, but unfortunately, it's not that easy. It's just, and it's not that easy, but at the same time, it's not that complicated. These writers are giving us the answers, do the work. The writers on this list are doing the hard, unsexy work of getting more skilled at their craft. They're writing new scripts, they're submitting scripts, they're getting notes on scripts. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And again, this isn't a shameless plug of the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. There's many similar services out there. You could try some of those, get feedback from different people. You could try friends. You don't even necessarily need a paid script analysis service. If you live in LA, you probably know other writers. Maybe you can trade scripts with them. There are services like stage32.com. You can go on there. You can join sort of the screenwriting section of Stage 32. You can meet other writers. You could potentially trade scripts with some of the writers you meet there. So it's not just about paying someone to give notes, but it is about sort of this attitude and, just work ethic that is writing lots of new scripts, getting feedback, trying to improve those scripts, and just getting stuff out there. So the second thing that stood out to me, and it's somewhat related to the first, is that I had 2 writers who never got back to me. So let me just take a step back and describe the process of choosing a screenplay a little bit, so this has a little more context. To start, I did exactly what I mentioned above. I simply asked the readers who read scripts for me what screenplays they thought stood out over the last year or so. This is the first annual list, so we did include some scripts that came to us before 2017. But in any event, once these recommendations started to come in, then I started to go through the scripts, look at the writers, look at what else they had done, look at the names that were floating to the top, and start to just figure out if the scripts that were recommended were a good fit for this list, because this list, again, had that extra criteria of needed to be produced on a relatively low budget. In this case, I said less than $1 million. It's basically a low budget film. And then once I had gone through all this material and figured out what scripts were a good fit for it, I emailed all the writers and asked if they'd like to be included. Obviously, there's no downside to being listed on a list like this. It's just free publicity for you as a writer and for your script. I'm going to market this piece heavily to producers, so it can really only help the writer. And in fact, this whole idea came from producers asking me really this specific question, do you have any low budget scripts? Are there any low budget scripts coming through the SYS script analysis service that you could recommend? I'd like to take a look. So this whole screenplay database project sort of evolved from that, and then putting this list together is sort of a component of that. Again, I think it's something producers will like, and it'll be helpful to the writers to get their names and their scripts, on the radar of the producers who check out this list. So again, back to the writers who didn't respond. Maybe my email, maybe they didn't understand my email. It was a pretty, straightforward email, or maybe their email got caught in a spam filter. We just don't know. I mean, what happened? Why these two writers didn't respond? But whatever the case, I hope they are not ignoring emails from the producers who might be interested in their screenplays. I mean, there's an old Woody Allen quote. It goes something like 80% of life is showing up. And I feel like these two writers just didn't show up. You've got to keep a valid active email working all the time. If you're going to be a professional screenwriter, you're going to get people emailing you. I've submitted scripts with my email and fax blast service. I've submitted scripts that way and not heard back for, years. I think there have been producers that have gotten to me after over a year. So you have to keep the same, you get an email address and you have to keep it active, valid. You have to check it, once every week or so, and just make sure that you're kind of churning that pot and keeping things going, because emails might arrive in your inbox. And again, going back to the 80% of life about life is just showing up. I feel like going back to my first point, the 7 writers who are on this list, they showed up big time. They're writing a lot of scripts. They're doing all the things that you need to do to be successful. So hopefully that's a lesson that we can all take from this list. So the third thing I wanted to mention is pretty minor, and it's certainly not statistically significant, but nevertheless, I thought it was interesting. So one of the whole points to this, and hopefully this isn't a surprise, is to promote the new SYS screenplay database to producers. Again, I know producers are looking for lists like this. I know producers are looking for low budget scripts. I get these kinds of questions all the time. So I think this list will have value to producers, because this is something that, producers are asking about. So each of the 7 writers, so again, I figured out which scripts were going to be applicable to this list. I emailed those writers, and then I said, hey, could you upload your script into the new SYS screenplay database? And then they went ahead and did that. So these are all screenwriters uploading their own information. It's not me necessarily interpreting it or anything like that. The writers had access to the interface. They made all the determinations on their own. And maybe it's not 100% as clean as I did look at it, and I did offer some suggestions to these writers. But in general, 6 out of the 7 writers, they chose the under 1 million in terms of budget range. And I thought this was really interesting. And the budget ranges inside the interface the budget ranges are less than $100,000, $100,000 to $250,000, less than 1 million, 1 to 5 million, 5 to 10 million, and then over 10 million. So those are the different choices that a writer could choose. And again, 6 out of 7 cases, the writers chose under 1 million. And I thought this was significant because everyone is always talking about one location features, and there are some good examples of those films out there. Buried by Chris Sparling is one shining example. I actually had him on the podcast a few years ago, and we talked specifically about that film. It's episode number 24 if you want to check that out. But overall, the readers didn't respond well to any of the super low budget, single location scripts. And I know I'm a big proponent of writing low budget scripts, but do keep this in mind. It just, in some cases, you might be going too low budget, and the story is actually being sacrificed a little bit. And again, you just have to take a step back and understand kind of what I'm getting at here is I'm a big proponent of low budget scripts, but again, the story has to be good and the story has to work. And maybe, that means a little more than $100,000. Maybe that means $500,000 or $800,000. Again, going back to my original point, you do need some experience to understand budget, and that's going to just come by doing it. You're going to have to get out there, produce some shorts, or at least work with a producer, work with a director on producing shorts and understand sort of what costs money and how the budgets are laid out. But I thought this was interesting that, the scripts that floated to the top, at least this year, they weren't the one location micro budget scripts. They were sort of that $1 million and less range, which is a decent amount of money to produce a film in this day and age. I mean, that's some money. You're going to have some name talent in a movie that's $1 million. You're going to get some name talent. We're not talking Tom Cruise here, but you're going to get some guys, good actors that you've heard of, been in some stuff, decent production value. A lot of the films, I would say the vast majority of the films that I am talking with the filmmakers here on the SYS podcast have been done for less than $1 million. And that's kind of why I chose that as the range for this list. Anyway, a couple of things to just keep in mind as you progress. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing actress and producer Kailys Smith. Westbrook, here is the interview. Welcome, Kailys, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can just give us a quick overview of your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado, and back to my earliest memories, I always just wanted to be an actress. I loved performing. I grew up going to Stage Door Manor, which is a performing arts training program in upstate New York. And I would audition a lot in high school. I'd fly to New York and do auditions for Broadway musicals like Rent. And I went to USC for acting. And slowly, when I started getting out into the real world after graduating college, I just started realizing there was so much storytelling than just acting. And the writer's strike of 2007 happened, and someone said, go create something for yourself. And so I wrote, created, acted, and produced my web series, MaryMe.com. And really since then, I've been doing it all, and it really launched my production company.
Okay. Perfect. So let's dig into people you may know. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or log line. What is this film all about?
Yeah, it's about an introvert who has never been on social media, who gets convinced that he'll never meet someone if he doesn't go online, and he joins Facebook, and in the process of signing on social media, he feels inadequate based on the pictures he would post, and he's a Photoshop editor by photoshopping himself into some pictures for fun, and it somewhat takes off and creates a life of its own, and it's really just about media and how it impacts our lives and our relationships.
Mm-hmm. How did you get involved with this project?
Well, I worked with the director and my producing partner, Sherwin Shalati and Shelley Stevens, back on the web series I mentioned, MaryMe.com. And I hired them both for Marry Me, and we just loved working together. And so in 2014, we sat down around my kitchen table and we said, let's do it again. And what would that look like? And we decided it was a feature. So we spent a good 3-4 just reading a bunch of scripts and reaching out to people, asking them, for ideas. And Sherwin's friend, Michael Mohan, had this 3-page treatment for People You May Know. And we ended up optioning it, and I worked Michael and Sherwin and Shelley to develop the story. And then Sherwin ended up going and writing it. And that's how we got here.
Okay. And so let's dig into that a little bit, because I know screenwriters, they're always trying to find, how are producers finding material. So in this case, it sounds like you found a treatment. Maybe you can talk specifically, like you said, you reached out to people. What exactly did that look like? Is it reach out to just people you've worked with over the years in the business? Did you put, a notice on Craigslist? Did you go to Inktip? Were there some services you used? Maybe you can talk just specifically about what that looked like, finding this 3-page treatment.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. We reached out to a bunch of representatives that we knew, agents and managers, asked to read any of their clients' work. We got the blacklist from a bunch of scripts from the blacklist from the 3 years prior that had never been produced and made, and were just sitting there. So we read through those. And then basically we just started talking to every person we knew, and I would say, we want to make a movie. Do you name one? This is the criteria of what we're looking for. And that would lead to another person, which would lead to another person, which would be, oh, my the screenwriter. And I'd sit down and I'd have coffee with them and I'd read their material. And I had a lot of interesting meetings in that time, actually, because I even reached out to people on Facebook that I hadn't connected with in 5-6 years that I knew were writers that I had during me down with them. And some of them were writers who had plays that had never been adapted into screenplays, and we talked about that process and maybe doing that. It was never actually a decision that Sherwin was going to be writing it until we were in the process developing it. We were really looking for something for him to direct, me to produce and act, and then Shelley to produce.
Okay. And so you just mentioned that you were asking people under a certain criteria. What were some of the criteria that you were looking for? No major violence or blood, because I don't like that. Something that there would be a role for me, because it was really for me and Sherwin to also work together in the director-actor dynamic and roles. And then it really had to be something that spoke to all of us, which was hard because we find some scripts or some ideas that Sherwin would be really passionate about or Shelley would really like, and they'd be like, yeah, I just don't want to spend the next 3 years of my life telling that story or working on that. So it really needed to have, it's very different when it's one person who's going out and saying, oh, I want to go make a story, make a film, and this is a story, and that you gravitate towards, and then you bring people together. We had 3 people who wanted to work together and had to find something that we all felt passionate about. Yeah. And so then what was it about this particular piece that you guys all were passionate about? For me, before I got it, I was laying in bed, and I was on Facebook, and I looked over at my husband in bed, and he was reading the news. And I just thought to myself, we're laying in bed next to each other, not even talking or looking at each other, staring at our phones. And maybe if we had it in our hands, I wouldn't have thought ice, but I just started having this moment and this thought of, is social media and the way we use our phones now actually disconnecting us from the people that we love and the people that we're actually in a room with. Mm-hmm. And next morning I woke and I had this email from Sherwin that said, hey, a friend sent me this treatment. Let me know what you think. And I read the first 3 lines, had goosebumps, and I would call them. I was like, this is it. And, for them, they had a daughter. They have a daughter, and their daughter at the time, I think she had just turned 1. And Sherwin talks about it a lot, that he felt like I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he talks about what he wants to leave for his daughter and what he wants her to take away from social media and to not place much emphasis or self-worth on social media. So this, for him, was somewhat like a letter to his daughter. Yeah. So as you're going through this process, it sounds like you were reading a lot of scripts. Are there any tips that you can give to writers as a producer? And then maybe, the follow-up question to that is, are there any tips you can give to writers as an actor? Yes. I feel processing both of those. No problem. So I would say my tips so as a producer, my tips for writers would be to, I guess, know what your story is and not try and adjust it to fit into a box for a producer. I think that there's definitely a collaboration that happens, but different people are going to respond to your material, and if it's the right producer, they're going to be in line and they're going to want to collaborate with you. When it's someone who comes in and they want to change everything,
even though you may really want to work with that producer, it may just like not be the best fit. I know for me as a producer, when I'm reading stuff, I have to use my gut, because I will read something that maybe is wonderful, but I don't have that like gut reaction to wanting to do. And sometimes it's so easy to be like, yeah, well, if you just change X, Y, and Z, this would be something I'd want to work on. But maybe that's not the best thing for the story and for the writer and the producer.
Yeah. And it's funny, it's funny.
So I would, I guess, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's funny you say that, because as from the writer perspective, that's refreshing to hear, because generally as a writer, I'm dealing with producers that are doing exactly what you're saying is, oh, I kind of like it, but we just need to completely rewrite it. And I always wonder, I'm always like, maybe it would just be better to look for another script. Anyways, I apologize for interrupting, but that's interesting to hear, because that's probably... I've been on the other side of it too as a writer, and I was working on projects that I was actually developing with two other writers. I was again producing, but I was working really in depth with them, and we needed another producer, a bigger company to come on that we wanted to sell it to. And we had like a huge company that was interested, and we went through so many hoops for an entire year and changed the script so much for this company. And then after we got to a place where we felt they liked it, that person left the company, and it was a new producer, and then they read it, and then it fell apart. And then I almost felt like if we had just stuck with our instincts of what this story was and needed, maybe we would have found the right producer instead of totally shifting gears. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's go back to that original question, though. So maybe just a couple tips for writers as an actor. Maybe there's some pet peeves that you see writers doing things over and over again, and then the flip side is maybe there's some things that you see writers doing that are really excellent, you wish more writers would do more of.
Yeah, I think for me, an actor pet peeves are when you're dictating someone's emotional state. Like, they sigh, they cry, she wipes a tear. I think that can actually cause a lot of block within an actor, because they feel they have to meet an emotional cue instead of maybe actually when they have the experience, they're going to laugh versus cry, and that's more powerful in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I understand as a writer that sometimes you need to lead people with tone. I recently read a script where every single line was, he sighed, it was over and over again, all directing the actors. And really the script is a blueprint that the actors and directors use to tell the story. So I feel like if you start controlling it too much from the beginning, you're stifling other people's creativity and the exploration process.
Yeah. No, that's a great tip. So let's talk about cast a little bit. Did you do a lot of the casting before you would raise money, or did you raise money and then get the cast? And I'm just always curious. I'm always curious because it's always sort of the chicken and the egg. Like, sometimes cast can help you raise money, but sometimes you have to raise the money and then get the cast. I mean, you had a ton of great actors in this piece, so I really commend you for doing a great job with that. Maybe you can talk about that process, how you got everything cast.
Yeah, we actually first got money because we felt as like a first time feature film producers and a first time director, we didn't want to go out to cast and saying, oh yeah, we're still looking for the money. I felt like people weren't going to take us seriously. Mm-hmm. So we went and raised the money first, hired a casting director, and that way, through the casting director, started putting out offers. Is how we went about it.
Okay, perfect. And so let's talk about that process of raising money. Maybe you can just quickly give us kind of the long and short of how you went about doing it, and any tips, some thoughts after you've gone through the process, maybe some things you would do differently now that you've been through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty standard in the sense that we created a business deck. Really pretty neat. It looked really nice and professional. We even hired someone to do it so it didn't, look like, because it was an independent film, we made people know that the film, the deck was going to represent the film that was going to be made. I think it's really important that when you're making a deck and trying to raise money, that it's not something like you're trying to do in Photoshop by yourself. It's the same thing like with a series Bible or when you're pitching anything creatively. I think it needs to look, really sleek. And so, and Sherwin, Shelley, and I all went out to people that we knew. And of course, the minute you speak to someone, they say, this isn't right for me, but this person, and, the doors just open. So that's how we actually just raised all of the money. We did all through equity.
Okay. And maybe you can talk about a little bit, what was your pitch to them as you're going out to your network of people? Are you pitching it as potentially a good, return on investment? Are you pitching it as, hey, this is a cool thing we're doing? Maybe just give us a little insight into what your pitch looked like.
I wish we could say independent film was a good investment, but we definitely not use that because I don't think that anyone would ever do this again. No, we said, clearly, we said, look, we're first-time filmmakers. We had success with this web series that we did. Here are our successes individually as, producers and directors. Here's our success that we've had together when working together. And here's the type of cast we want. Here's the creative team we pull together. And we also did it, I feel like, in a realistic budget for this type of movie. We definitely could have doubled our budget and did it in 18 days. Is that right? Yeah, 18 days. So originally it was only 17 and we added it. So, we were really smart way that we spent money, and we were just very honest with everyone that we went out to about it.
Yeah, perfect. So how can people see people you may know? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Yes, we're releasing November 28th, and you can onto iTunes or onto your cable providers on demand, and you can rent it, buy it, watch it over and over again.
Perfect. And so what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Just some of your future projects, Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, and I will round it up and put it in the show notes. But if you're on any of those platforms, you can just mention those accounts.
Yeah, mostly on Instagram and Facebook. Kailys Smith Westbrook are my handles. They sometimes show up on Twitter. Okay. I'm not as active on Twitter, but mostly I would say Instagram is where I post everything I'm doing.
Okay, perfect. Well, Kailys, I really appreciate your coming on and talking with me. I wish you the best of luck with this film.
Of course, so much. Really appreciate it.
We'll talk to you later. I just want to mention a brand new service that I recently launched. I've built the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline synopsis and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays they want to produce. I'm adding features to this service nearly every day, so ultimately it will be the hub for all of the SYS Select services. If you're a member of SYS Select already, you should have already received your login information. If you haven't, please let me know. I'll happily email that to you again. I've already started to invite in producers to use the service, so there are already some producers in the system searching for screenplays. I'm going to keep the current price in place for the next month or so as I try and ramp the service up. So if you sign up now, you'll get grandfathered in on the current pricing. So when I do the price increase won't affect you. I'm not going to increase the price for any current subscriptions, any current members. So whatever price you signed up for, that will be grandfathered in perpetuity, assuming you keep your subscription active. To learn more about all of this, just go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com and you can learn more about all of the services, including this new one. When you join SYS Select, you get access to this brand new screenplay database service along with all other services we're providing to SYS Select members. And those services include a monthly newsletter that goes to our list of over 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also provide screenwriting leads. We have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, I've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or who are looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots. It's a huge array of different types of project that these producers are looking for, and these leads are, of course, exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. Also, you get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. Also in the forum is all the recorded screenwriting classes that I've done over the years. So you'll have access to all of those as well. To learn more about the classes that I have done, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/online-classes. Again, I will link to this in the show notes just so you can check out all the classes. But if any of this sounds like something you would like to learn more about, again, go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. So on the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing producer Bob Farkas. He just did a film called Crazy Famous. He's got a great story about how he got his first feature film off the ground. He doesn't live in Hollywood, and he has had a whole other career in a whole other field. I think there's probably a lot of listeners who will be able to relate to his story. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.